Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. Catholic leaders in one of India's most populous states are demanding the repeal of a new law that criminalizes religious conversion. The 13th such measure enacted across the country under the ruling Hindu-nationalist government. We talk more about India's anti-conversion measures with Chad Bauman. Chad is, amongst other things, the author of Anti-Christian Violence in India. Chad, thank you very much for joining us. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. It's a pleasure to be with you, Dr. Peter.
I'm very glad to be speaking with you. This is a very tenuous affair, and I want to begin by asking you to speak about this new law, the 13th of its like in India.
Yeah, this new law is particularly concerning to Christians for a number of reasons. There have been, as you mentioned, 12 other states that have passed laws like this since the 1960s. And they have always been problematic because they've always banned force, fraud, and allurement, and they've defined those terms so vaguely that the laws have been used easily to harass Christians whom people didn't like. But over the years, the laws have gotten progressively more draconian and more onerous and more restrictive. And this one is restrictive more than any of the others in ways I'd be happy to talk about if you'd like me to.
Sure, yeah. Maybe let's begin exactly there. That as draconian as they are, they're really rooted in a particular paradigm of the Hindu-nationalist government right now.
That's exactly right. In 2014, the current government, the Bharatiya Janata Party, took power. They'd always been the opposition since the time of independence in various forms, and their strength slowly grew since the late 1990s for a variety of reasons until they took power at the center in 2014. And since then, they have supported directly and indirectly the kind of institutions and organizations that would take it upon their hands to harass and enact violence against religious minorities.
Tell us about the particular kind of targeting that we've seen ever since the enactment of these laws. And does there seem to be a particular vitriol against Christians?
Yes, I mean, historically, Muslims in India have suffered far more than Christians, and that's because of the history of relations with Pakistan, the rending of the Indian subcontinent into largely Hindu India and largely Muslim Pakistan, and then the wars that India and Pakistan have fought since then. And then there's, of course, been continuing issues with terrorism sponsored from Pakistan that has angered many Indians against the people of Pakistan. So there's continuing tensions there that have spilled over into anti-Muslim violence that has been widespread since the time of independence. But Christians also have been the target of harassment and violence for much of India's independence. And it was largely because of fear of conversion that Christians would manage to convert such a large number of Christians to their faith that they would begin to move to secede, create new countries, or just swamp the Hindu majority and begin to control politics. And since the 1990s, the late 1990s, that harassment of and violence against India's Christians has really ramped up from just a few dozen cases in the late 90s to over 800 incidents of anti-Christian violence a year, according to the latest figures by the Evangelical Fellowship of India.
Tell us about the grander response that has come from the Christian leaders in India at large.
Yeah, the response is mixed, and I will say that there are strong responses right today, particularly from Catholic leaders in India who have protested this most recent law and its more draconian aspects, which again are relatively new. Historically, there's been some division among Christians about this. The violence disproportionately affects the more evangelistic faiths, evangelistic denominations of Christianity, so especially evangelical and Pentecostal Christianity. And there have been times when some of the mainstream faiths, the Orthodox, the mainstream Protestant, and the Catholic organizations have sort of kept a distance from those evangelicals and Pentecostals because they didn't want to be associated with them, and because they because in some ways they blamed those groups for provoking the harassment and violence they experience through their aggressive evangelistic means. So there have been times when the Christians in India have not been totally united in their response, But as things have ramped up in the last decade under this Hindu-nationalist party, the Bharatiya Janata Party, there has been more and more Christian unity and more of a unified response and a reaction and a protest against the developments.
What are Hindu vigilantes? Do they pose a significant threat to non-Hindu religious people in India, especially Christians?
Yes, there is. So the Bharatiya Janata Party is part of what's called the Sangh Parivar. It's a family of organizations, some political, some more religious, some more vigilante. So some of these groups are more violent than others. And at times the violence is just inspired by these groups, but very often the people organizing them and kind of provoking the violence against India's minorities are associated with these groups. And a lot of times there's also just a threat of violence. The groups will show up at a church, try to cow a pastor or evangelist into not going out into rural areas, not going out into towns where there aren't many Christians, not proselytizing. And but there are times as well, obviously, as I mentioned already, at least 100 times every year now, when this harassment does spill into actual violence against India's Christians, which is sometimes even deadly.
Considering all that you've just shared, how do these laws fare in light of the constitutional structure of India?
Yes, when the first laws were passed in 1967 and 68 in the states of Madhya Pradesh and Odisha, they were contested, and the legality, the constitutional legality of these laws was contested by Christians. And in 1977, there was a famous ruling that declared them constitutional. And the way it did so was by very finely parsing a particular phrase from the Indian Constitution, which does preserve the right to propagate religion. But the Supreme Court in that 1977 ruling indicated that the right to propagate was more or less a right to teach, and did not include the right to evangelize with the attempt to convert somebody to one's faith. And so because of that, since then, these laws have become wider and wider and have appeared in more and more states. There have been attempts to pass similar laws at the national level that have, thankfully for Christians, failed multiple times. But many of the states that are ruled more thoroughly by the more nationalist, Hindu-nationalist party, the Bharatiya Janata Party, they have managed to pass these laws, and it's something that their base demands.
So essentially, even the people in India are aware that a lot of these laws violate what are essential constitutional freedoms enshrined in India's structure. It's just that because these laws are being passed, it's very hard to get around them.
Yes, and again, because the Supreme Court called that, considered them legally, legal constitutionally in 1977, there hasn't been really a way to fight against them on the legal or constitutional front. And there's tension in the Indian Constitution, because the Indian Constitution does indicate that everyone should have a freedom of privacy, and that everyone should have the freedom to practice their religion. The issue is that for many Christians, the practice of religion includes proselytization, and these laws are expressly restricting that freedom in various ways. And this is what the Catholic bishops have been pointing out, that some of the more draconian aspects of this law, which include reporting an intent to convert to the district magistrate, which is like a count in the United States would be like a county official, and leaving a 60-day waiting period, and needing to publicize the intent to convert so that others can object. All of these things are invasions of privacy, and the Catholic bishops' associations in India have been making those points, but it's still ineffective in undoing the laws.
Chad, I would have loved to continue deeper into the social impoverishment and ramifications this has on Hindus and Christians, but thank you very much for your time.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks.
My guest has been Dr. Chad Bauman, professor of religion at Butler University, author of Anti-Christian Violence in India. We've been talking about the recent passing, the 13th such, of an anti-conversion bill in India. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.